Okay, guys, welcome back. Chapter 22, the spine. This is something we're going to be doing on young children, babies in particular. Um, just like the skull, which we cannot look at the brain in of a 5-year-old because the fontanelles are basically closed. Same thing with the spine. We really can't look at the spine of toddlers and older because there's just too much calcification, too much closure of the spine. So this can only be done for pretty much neonates, babies. Um, and we're going to be looking at um, possible spinal defects that are occult. Occult meaning hidden. The spinal defects that are obvious shouldn't really come to ultrasound. There's probably not a reason for us to be looking at a big open lesion in the back, which would be a myelocele or myelomeningeal. Let me share. Yeah, let me share screen. Okay. So talk about the spine. We're going to be looking at this on this first. Let's just go look at this first image a little closer. So this is little black space between the transducer and the baby, right? So this person used a standoff pad in order to image a little better. If it's too close, remember, it doesn't scan as well. This person also used something that we do not have in our current machines, and that is a panoramic view. So they started here and they just moved down. You can see kind of this little line here where there's a bit of an error as the machine is kind of putting pixels together. It watches the pixels go by and kind of understands how to put it all together, just like the panoramic view of your phone. Obviously, we're going to be looking at the vertebrae here. We're actually going to be counting vertebrae and looking at the spinal cord itself, which is this hypoechoic line with the echogenic center. Let's back out a little. Why? Some reasons are, like I said before, too obvious. Meningioceles and myelomeningioceles are generally open. But they're obvious. The baby is either, if you didn't see it in utero, the baby is born, you can clearly see it on the back. Usually the lower back, right about here, is where most meningioceles, myelomeningioceles occur. They can occur up higher. They can, up at the level of the chest, even though the level of the neck, but most of them occur down low because that's the way our spine folds and fuses in utero. Starts in the middle, it works our way out, and usually the very last part to fuse is the lumbar sacral area down here. Other less obvious reasons, but are concerning signs, is lipomeningeocele. That one, I wasn't sure whether to put that into the too obvious or less not so obvious other column, because sometimes they are completely obvious. On page 723 of your book, you have a very obvious lipomeningeocele, but still worth for sonography to see exactly what's going on. Just lipomas in general. Hair tuft in that region. So if you have a little kid with a little hairy back kid, but it's a tuft in one region, not like some kids are born a little fuzzy, and that's not what we're talking about. Hemangiomas, so skin discoloration in the midline spine area. Dermal sinus, or hole basically, in the skin midline back, or a dimple. Most dimples, a lot of people have dimples right above the sacral I'm sorry, gluteal fold, in other words, the butt. And the vast majority of those dimples are completely normal, but they can indicate a sinus tract going all the way down to the spinal cord. And any kind of skin tags along the midline spine are also concerning. Now, I might as well tell you right now why lipomas and lipomeningioceles and hair tufts. Well, what's actually happening is that is a failure of migration. Basically, the spine folds, cells migrate. You have different types of cells are migrating, and in the case of an occult spina bifida, the skin might have closed, maybe even the bones mostly formed, but there's a few cells were left behind that should not be there, and they can turn into fat cells. So a lipoma, same thing along the skin. The hair tuft is kind of a leftover, so the cells didn't know what else to do, so they turned into hair cells. So they're, what do I call them? And lipomas form as inclusions of tissues that should have migrated away. And dermoid tumors are similar in that way as well. Let's quickly look at just a regular spine over here. And I wrote the number 7 right here because whether you are a mouse, a giraffe, a human, an elephant, as long as you are a mammal, you have 7 cervical vertebrae. So you can imagine that the difference in length between our cervical vertebrae and a giraffe's are a bit different, but they're still 7, interestingly enough. Thoracic vertebrae, we have 12. So if we count it, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Lumbar, we have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Curiously enough, supposedly, I have 6 lumbar vertebrae, which could explain my constant back problems. But the doctor, in quotes, who diagnosed that, didn't have the full picture because here's the thing: she counts. She had an X-ray of, let's see, probably a little farther down, but anyway, that general region. Cheater here, and let me do something else really quickly, guys. I'm gonna merge all levels, so now they're all in one level. I just unmerged it. Okay. She was counting down from the last rib, and the problem is some people have less ribs, like maybe the last float. There's a couple of floating ribs. And some people might not have it, or some people actually have an extra rib. So that's one of the ways that to count vertebrae, even in ultrasound, is to go from the last rib. I don't like that because a significant number of people in the population do have either missing or extra ribs. So I don't like that. A very, very small amount of people have extra lumbar, and if I truly do, then I'm 1 in a million. Probably not. She probably miscounted or didn't count correctly, but anyway. So lumbar, there's 5, and sacrum. We're not really seeing sacrum really well in this picture, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's the coccyx bone down here. But actually in the baby, it's not a bone actually at all. It is completely uncalcified remainder. In fact, here's a picture right here, uncalcified. So this area from here to here. Anyway, that will be bone in the future. And if anyone's banged their coccyx, they'll know that it's an extremely painful bone. I almost broke mine once and was horrible. So we look at the spine through the back. Now this person did not use a standoff pad, and they seem to have great imaging anyway. Like I said, we count back. Let's see. So if I were to count, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, idiot, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nope. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. So this is difficult. The reason it's difficult is because sometimes the very end of the, I need yellow. Like this guy right here, I wasn't sure whether or not to count him as sacral, S5, is it so S5 question mark, or is this one S5? And so that is a difficulty because sometimes the unossified coccyx can have a little bit of calcification here. But if that's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then of course the sacrum is the curvy part. The question is this L5 or S1? That's the question. On this particular picture, I'm not a 100. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 5. So L5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then this would be T12, and then all the way up. So we're only looking at the lower back right here. If this truly is the numbers, and then we have this little guy right here, this is called the conus medullaris. 95% of the time, this is what you're going to be doing on one of these exams, is figuring out where exactly the conus medullaris ends. And this one ends right at the end of the conus, at the end of L2. So let's kind of write L2 right here. Well, that's a little scary. Another millimeter, if it touches L3, then it's abnormal. So this is it's about as close as one can get to being abnormal. Normally, we would prefer to see the conus end maybe here. Maybe even here. But ending all the way here, just touching the level of number 3, little scary, but not exactly terrifying, but scary. So conus medullaris, that is the end of the spinal cord. It is not the end of the nerves, just the cord itself. The central echo complex is called something differently in your book. They call it the central canal. So let's do that. The central canal, or the central echo complex. So it is an echogenic center on this mostly hypoechoic spinal cord. So the echogenic center, and it's a canal, as in it is filled with cerebral spinal fluid, but it is so thin normally that we don't see anything in there. We will talk about the possibility of seeing a little cyst right here, but normally nothing but echogenicity is seen there, even though it is technically fluid filled with cerebral spinal fluid. And of course, there's cerebral spinal fluid on the outside here, a lot more. So I mentioned this is the spinal cord, that's the conus medullaris, but it doesn't just end. There are hundreds, I was going to say thousands, but let's just say hundreds of little hair-like structures coming off of here. That is called the cauda equina. The horse's tail, cauda equina, the horse's tail. And those are free floating inside of the, sometimes called the thecal sac. They're free floating in the space. We'll get to that in a second. Free floating and should be moving. If you see them flutter every time the baby's heart beats, if you see a little bit of fluttering, that's a very good sign. If you don't see them fluttering, that's not a good sign. That means perhaps they're being pulled on. Now, one thing that's not well seen on this picture, we got some better pictures that we'll also look at. I figured I'd mess this picture up. Is really there's kind of a terminal, you see it here, you didn't see it over here, so I kind of had to draw it in. But let's just continue drawing it here. Get rid of that stuff. That is called the phylum terminae. That is not, so cauda equina, by the way, so those are nerves, right? I mean, I kind of danced around it, but I didn't actually say it. Nerves. Drop the. No, definitely didn't in there. Nerves. Okay. And then the phylum terminae is really connective tissue, kind of a connective tissue, and it is an extension of the central canal. So the central canal is coming along here, echogenic, and then also the connective tissue along the outside of the spinal cord, and then those all come together to create the phylum terminae, this guy right here. Phylum terminae will attach pretty much all the way down at the end of what's called the thecal sac. Thecal, T-H, not F as in equal. T-H with thecal. So that's we'll call it the thecal sac. And that's really the, that's what everything's floating inside of. So the spinal cord, the conus medullaris, the cauda equina, the phylum terminae are all sitting inside of this sac. The sac usually terminates at L2. Well, that's another way of looking at this. So 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, that confirms that I've counted correctly, because if this is S2, sacral number 2, and we look straight up from there, we see the end of the thecal sac, then we are probably, let's see, yeah, the sac looks like it ends right there, that we probably have counted correctly. So the thecal sac ends at L2. Let's see, I'll just go ahead and write this. Conus medullaris, or I guess there's 2 L's. Conus medullaris, or just sometimes called the conus. That ends, should end between yay. All right, let me fix a little error here before I go any further. S2, sorry, thecal sac is S2, conus medullaris is L1 to L2 is the normal range. So like I said before, this guy could end at any point in here and be normal. And this particular one is right on the edge. Any farther, and you would have to report it as abnormal. So like literally 1 more millimeter. Transverse views of the same, let's see, region. We have dura mater is the same dura mater that is in the brain. It is kind of the outside tough covering. If you have an epidural, actually, the needle comes, generally, you don't want the needle coming all the way down into the spinal cord. That's generally a bad thing. The needle just pops through right here, and then the doctor pours in I'm just going to say it's not lidocaine, but you know what I mean, a painkiller into the area and deadens the sensations from there. So spinal cord, central complex echo. And you know what? This is not a great picture. So we should have some better pictures. Let's see, where am I? Okay, let me look at my notes really quickly. So conus medullaris, L1, L2, thecal sac, S5, phylum terminae is really connective tissue, and there could be cerebral spinal fluid inside of that, because remember, it's a extension of the central canal or the central echo complex, and so that has cerebral spinal fluid in it. The phylum terminae can have cerebral spinal fluid in it. Of course, the phylum terminae is surrounded by cerebral spinal fluid because it is sitting in the thecal sac. The cauda equina, the nerves. I guess we could talk about normal. Well, okay, actually, we have a normal variant. It's the next thing in my notes, and I have it actually right here. Well, I have one of the normal variants. And that is a filar cyst. So let's look at this. As we go along, we have the spinal cord, conus medullaris, central echo complex, and then the phylum is coming up, and then whoop, a little cyst right here. And then it looks like it attaches along the dura mater up there. So this cyst is a normal variant. When we see this, we note it. You can measure it, but it is a normal variant. That is a filar cyst. The other one actually is a ventriculus terminalis. So kind of funny, up in the brain, remember we have the first 2 ventricles are considered the lateral ventricles, and then there's a 3rd ventricle and a 4th ventricle. And some people have actually called this, there's like a tiny slight opening right there. They actually call it the 5th ventricle, which I think is very misleading. But it is possible for fluid to kind of develop right here and create a little cyst right there as well. As long as it's small, and as long as it is a part of this central echo complex, that is also a normal variant. That is a ventriculus terminalis. Sorry, I felt like Harry Potter there for a second. Okay, let's go look back at a little more, some better images here. This one's numbered for us, so this is nice. Oh, now this kid has pretty well ossified. In fact, you can see there's ossification. This is where it gets confusing. Do you count that as S5? Nope, they counted this as S5. But it's like, well, wow, how do you know? Well, looks like a slightly older baby, a little better ossified. And so, that's one way of saying, well, okay, we got a nice square looking elements here, and then this is like just little round. So that's very different looking. So they have decided that this is S5, and I'm sure rightly so. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then the lumbar, the only reason these are hard to see is because look at this, the spinous processes up here are becoming calcified. And so they're causing shadowing down. So it's not that these guys are less calcified, ossified really, than these over here. It's just they're being shadowed out. So let's look at this. L2, L1, conus medullaris ends right here, right in the middle of L2. Okay, this baby does not have a tethered cord. No tethered cord. Apparently I'm a little too close to right. What else can we say about this? Well, it's hard to see because of this shadowing. It's hard to see a lot of the details in here, but oh, I wonder if we can see the end of the thecal sac. It should be, here's S2. And I'm guessing, I think that's it right there. You can see that after the sac, there's still elements going along. That's okay, as long as it is not tethered. Here's another. Oh no, this was a great picture, but I made it too small, and so it lost its goodness. But look, see what, once again, conus medullaris ends right here, right before L3. So that one's like another, probably in this one, 2, 3 millimeters, and then we'd call it abnormal. A nice transverse image shows this is the central echo complex right there. So, and then this is spinal cord. And little hairs are already starting to come off of it. So that's the cauda equina. Let me pause here for a second. What am I doing? Where's my? Oh, that's right. No, it's not. Okay, I just had to take a little break there. So we kind of talked about normal. Dysraphism, incomplete fusion or development of the neural tube. Neural tube is what we originally have before we have a spine and a spinal cord and everything inside of that. So, and obviously these happen. Most of us know about spina bifida. Open are obvious. And I've already mentioned those. Meningiocele, Myleo meningioceles tend to be open. And those will cover actually more in OBGYN because the obvious are not going to come to us after they are born. Doctors know exactly what's going on without ultrasound telling them. But the closed is the occult and often has a tethered cord. So like I said, when we see movement inside of the sac, that is a good thing. When the cauda equina are floating around, that is a good thing. But if they are not moving, that is concerning. If the conus medullaris is too low, that is concerning because it is likely tethered by oftentimes a a mass growing in there. And so likewise, the masses are related to occult spina bifida. Let's just write that spina. Occult spina bifida. So even though everything seems normal, maybe even the x-ray that the child had is normal, but there's still concerns, and you end up having these lipomas that are in there. It is related to spina bifida, even the very, very minor spina bifida that can't even be seen with x-ray can be related to generally lipomas are the masses that we're most often going to find there. This is just kind of an interesting picture of, and I've seen this before. This is no big deal, and a dimple, gluteal fold. Basically, the butt is right up here, and there's a little dimple here. This dimple has a track going all the way down into the coccyx, but probably not a problem. First of all, I don't think this baby's going to have a tethered cord because of this, and also bacteria, they may travel down a little bit. You could possibly get an abscess in here, but the big thing we worry about with a tract going from the skin to the spinal cord is oh God, pause recording. Okay, the moment I hit pause, I remembered meningitis. Meningitis. All right. Where am I on this? Great. Oh, I didn't do those transverse pictures there. I'll come back to those. I did that one. Let's just zoom in on these guys here. Here we have the conus medullaris, seems to be flattened. It seems to be flattened out. And there's a fatty looking tumor here, and this is in fact a lipoma. A lipoma sitting right there. Now, let me look at my notes here. I don't want to say anything wrong when it comes to. Okay, I kind of jumped the gun on lipomas, but it is what it is. This lipoma, it could almost be considered like if it was only this part right here, that's kind of an increased phylum terminae. They can have a fatty phylum terminae, which may or may not have any problems associated with it. And this is kind of the same thing. This is a really fatty phylum terminae. And so this is probably pulling a little bit. It does end just at the end of L2, so that's okay. But there's probably could be some minor problems associated with this lipoma. Let's see, on this one, oh, that's right. Conus medullaris is really narrow like that, rather than more, I can't use that one as a, but rather than shape, whoops. Well, you know what I mean. It's very narrow, and look at this, L3. It's actually at the end of L3. This is tethered. Tethered. What's tethering it? I don't know. I don't see it, but something is pulling it down. What this arrow is also showing is that many, I don't think all, but many of the cauda equina seem to be pulled upward. This guy is pulled upward, and that means most likely there is a maybe lipoma, maybe and maybe some kind of something going on here where everything is getting pulled towards a mass up in that area, or dorsally. Let's get a little closer in. I can't remember what's going on with these two. Well, this one is like what, you know, I don't see any mass here. Look at this, the conus medullaris is super pointy all the way down to S2. That's pretty much, that's where the thecal sac is supposed to end. And so that is extremely pulled down, very much pulled down, but I don't necessarily see what's doing it. I don't see a tumor here. I don't see lipoma. I don't see an open defect. So let's look at this one. Oh, I remember this one. I think this is just a little bit too fat of the phylum terminae. So a fatty phylum terminae, but that's not a problem. Conus, little funny shaped there, but it does end right at the very end, you know, another 2 millimeters or so, and we would have a problem. Oh, and then since we're on the subject of fat, this one, this might even be the baby that's on, yeah, probably is the same baby that's on page 723. This is a Myleo meningio seal. So lipo for fat, Myleo for sorry, I had to stop and think for a second. Myleo for the coverings of the spinal cord. Meningio, meaning that it's really affecting or taking the cord elements with it. And when it comes to lipomas, I'm not really sure how they say meningio as well, because I don't see where you would know whether the spinal cord, like the cauda equina, is it all coming up here as well? Because that's what happens with a Myleo meningio seal is make sure I get the terminology correct. So let's put it this way: a meningio seal. I'm jumping around, and I apologize for that. But let's get away from the fat tumor for a second and just call about the non-occult. These are the obvious ones. A meningio seal is basically there's a defect in the spine, and meningies. I'm sorry, but the spinal cord continues on. You know, maybe it's tethered, maybe it's not, and the cauda kind of travel in the same direction they're supposed to be, but there might be a cystic structure here. And that's just with a meningio seal. The meningies is sticking out, and that's kind of the covering. Meningio-Myleo seal. Remember, we're ignoring this fat for a second. Meningio-Myleo seal is when cauda equina is up there as well, inside of the cyst. It could be a cyst, or it could be wide open. Meningio-Myleo seal. Myleo meningio seal. God, I hope I said that right the first time. Myleo meningio seal. So now we're including neural elements into the area. But the reason I'm saying that now, most of that I want to talk about next semester. But this semester we're talking about the spine in the neonate spine. So those two meningio seals, Myleo meningio seals, we're probably not going to be seeing those people because they're too obvious. Why bring them to ultrasound? But here, this is a big fat tumor, so you can see there's something going on in here. It's all fatty. But just what I'm saying is the term lipomyleo meningio seal Clearly, there's fat that has started down here and has grown all up in here. That's all a big fatty tumor there. It has clearly gone through a defect, so the spine is probably not well formed here, so the fat was able to grow through the defect easily. So in this one, this is a, I hope it didn't, all right. Lipo fat. Myleo. So that would be the nerve. Meningio, the meningies, the covering seal. So this is basically a pretty bad case, and this child is going to have the same problems as a child with a regular spina bifida, because the nerves are probably very damaged in here. Okay, so I did there was a term, and I couldn't even find any ultrasounds on it. There was another one. I don't have a picture for it. Terminal myelocystocele. Cystocele. And that is a case where so we have the spinal cord coming down. There's a central echo complex. And like I said before, you can have a cyst here in that central echo complex, and that is a normal variant. And some people have actually regarded this as the fifth ventricle, going all the way down, fourth ventricle up in the head, and then fifth ventricle all the way down here at the end of the spinal cord. Terminal, that's also called the terminal ventricle. So this is a terminal myelocystocele. There are some cases where this cyst becomes huge. And so instead of looking like that, which is a normal variant, it now has gone to extreme size, all filled with fluid. I don't know that ultrasound or any imaging would really be able to know that that is what this is. I think closer examination is really the only way to tell for sure, because how would you determine terminal myelocystocele when all you're seeing is a big cyst? It could be meningiomyocele or meningiocele. Okay, I did skip something, and so I'm sorry guys, but this is kind of off the cuff, and I do want to be getting out the door pretty soon here. So I'm going to borrow this guy here. So we did mention the kind of a sacral dimple, and so you could have a tract going from the sacrum and running down into the very end of the spine there, where we don't really worry about it. Well, we do, but it's not too bad. You can have something up higher though, with a tract running down. If that tract runs into there, so you could have this tract without any evidence of a tethered cord, any other evidence of any problems except for this right here. That is of concern as well. And I've actually seen this in utero and reported it, because that can cause meningitis if bacteria were to travel down here and get into the spinal cord or then into the fecal sac. And then, of course, once bacteria is in here, the baby is in a lot of trouble. So let's see. Let me look at my notes. I know I did this page. Ooh. Skipped over. Tethered cord, conus at or below, pulled dorsally, reduced movement. I did miss diastomelia. I'll talk about that in a second. Dorsal dermal sinus. And so, yeah, this would be a, if this were the case, that would be a, oh, I changed my color back. Dorsal dermal sinus. Didn't have a good picture of it, or I didn't find one, so I just made that up. Sacral dimple, we already talked about that. That's more back here. And that can be blind ending. Could just, most people, it's simply just a blind ending dimple, but sometimes it can go all the way down into the sacrum. It's also, you know what, let's add something here. Actually, we had an actual sacral dimple, did we not? Down here. Let's just add this is also called a pilonidal cyst or sinus or tract. So you could have, sometimes you get a little bloop there, but and I'm also going to put tract down. So that's the sinus or tract going down in there. That's called pilonidal. And adults actually get pilonidal cysts as well. And so those are sometimes, you could, in ultrasound, look at one of those. They're pretty obvious too once you have them. Similar but gluteal fold, most often blind ending. Yeah, so in my notes I have these are very similar to the dorsal dermal sinus, except that these are basically within the gluteal fold. So this is the butt is kind of just over here. You'd have to spread the top of the butt cheeks apart in order to see this dimple, whereas a dorsal dermal sinus is a little higher up on the back. That could be anywhere actually on the back. The dorsal dermal sinus could be anywhere on the back. But as usual, the lower you go, the more likely it is. Okay, there's only one thing I missed, guys. And, well, I wanted to talk about those too, but actually, let's do this. We'll talk about these. This is normal. Sorry, I just missed this picture before, and I know I'm a little disorganized today, but this is a transverse view, of course, of the spine and spinal cord here. Seems to be getting smaller, and there's lots of hair around it. So this is pretty close to the conus medullaris. So pretty close to the end of the cord. You would see these guys are oftentimes like in little bundles. They're loosely fitting bundles. I don't think they're, in fact, I know they're all loose. They just sometimes bundled together by, I don't know, static electricity or whatever. But you actually would see these bouncing around with every time the heart beats. They bounce, 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 and that's good. Oh, and this is what I'm talking about. As you go a little farther down, we are no longer, let's see, the phylum terminae, I think is that guy right there. Phylum terminae. And then this is the horse here. This is the cauda equina. So all those in there. And then of course this one over here, looks like a couple of bundles there. And they just tend to bundle up by accident, really. Oh, this thing's gonna... Okay. So one thing I did not talk about, and I don't have a picture of, your book has a picture, so you can look at that there. Diastomelia. These almost always occur with spinal, always associated with spinal column defect. Associated with spinal column defect. It is basically split into two chords. And so what you would see, like on a transverse view, and this is usually higher, this is not down in the lumbar, this is usually higher up. But what we would see is our fecal sac, a spinal cord with a central echo, another spinal cord with a central echo, and I think I'm drawing a superhero here. And there's some kind of septum in between. This could could be a bony septum, excuse me, cartilaginous septum. And this usually, these two cords usually refuse. And so you would see this where, let's say in a sagittal view, you have your spinal column, and then there's some kind of major major issue, and then you have your cord doing that. Let's see, that's L2. Excuse me. I know, we're gonna draw a little horse hair down here. And, well, I'm not gonna draw that, it's confusing. Here, I'll draw the central echo complex. Okay, so here's our spinal cord. In sagittal, diastomelia is probably going to be occurring in this area. So there's an obvious defect in the spinal column. So as you're scanning along, a defect like that, if this is the reason why you're scanning and not because of a tethered cord, you're looking at some kind of defect there. Then in transverse, pay attention for this sign where you have two cords side by side. And like I said, it might start here, end here, and so by the time you get down to the bottom of the cord, there's still just one cord. So it's like one cord, two cords, back to one cord. Anyway, that's diastomelia. Dorsal sinus. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm done. I'm done. So yeah, I got to. Oh, I'm not done. I've got a website I want you guys to look at with me here. Where'd you come from? Where'd you? That's not it. Oh, there it is. Duh. Okay, let me come back to sharing screen. Okay, here, you guys should be able to see my beautiful face. All right. Classifications of spinal dysraphism, spina. bifida, spina bifida aperta. And so this, I very, very, very ineloquently already told you about this, and I'm really, that's not going to get any bigger, apparently. That's what he said. Meningiocele, the meningies only are coming through. Now, this meningiocele, myelomeningeal we'll talk about next semester, but I just wanted to mention it. Meningiocele, meninges only, the covering only goes through the defect. The cauda equina continues on its merry way. Doesn't mean that this person is not going to have some serious issues on their ability to ambulate or urinate. There's all sorts of problems because, anyway, myelomeningeal, we now have the meninges and nerve elements coming up through here. And so that obviously is a little more concerning, but they're both rather concerning. Spina bifida occulta on this person is completely skin covered. In fact, the only indication that we have of a spina bifida occulta, perhaps, depending on the baby's ability to move its legs and stuff, it could be right where the arrow is here, where it's coming up to the skin. There could be a dimple. There could be a hair tuft. There could be all sorts of those types of things. So, intact covering of skin, the elements, especially when there are skin changes like hair tufts, hemangiomas, pigmented spots, cutaneous dimples, or subcutaneous mass. That subcutaneous mass would probably be a lipoma. Another reason to confirm is when there is a congenital anomaly associated with like atresia. Okay. Okay, transverse view, normal anatomy. Spinal cord with central echogenesis, so that's that central canal here. Spinal cord around here. Yeah, and they say this is the conus medullaris. So this is the cauda equina is surprisingly dense around here. Nerve roots, that's the same thing as cauda equina, nerve roots. Yeah, okay. Once again, conus in sagittal view, vertebral bodies. Let's hope that this is, its head conus ends right here. Let's hope that this is number 2, L2, because if this is L3, it's too far down. If it's L1, yeah, it's okay if it's L1, I guess, but it's kind of, this is a bunch of moving strands. The cauda equina is seen as a bunch of moving strands. If the baby is lying in its cubitus position, the strands will gravitate to the dependent posterior side. Let's see, the phylum terminate can be seen as a thin echogenic thread. The dura sac ends at approximately S2. So the phylum terminate is rather hard to see. It's right here. And then beyond that, look at that little fluid right there. That could actually be a normal variant with the cyst in the phylum terminate. So filar cyst, maybe. I'm not seeing enough to really make that determination, but I think that's probably it. Let's quickly look at this guy. Really? That was awfully, oh, I had already looked through much of it. That's why it was so short. Just go away. So let's see, pretty normal. Let's see, probably 5, 4, 3, 2. You can see, look at all this movement. You can see it moving around in there. So it's floating basically. Conus, yeah. I forget that I could just hit pause, can't I? conus medullaris ends right about here, and then phylum terminae goes through here. Let's see if we can, what is that fluid right there? Is that, oh, I hate you. Well, I can't tell if there's a cyst, filar cyst there or not. All right, let's move on. I gotta go to work. Always obtain axial views. The movement of the nerve roots is better seen in the transverse plane compared to the sagittal. That's pretty cool, actually. So seeing the, go away, seeing the bones kind of come in and out like that, it's because we're sliding down, boom, 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 over each vertebrae, and the lateral processes are coming in and out of the image. So all the way down to the coccyx here. Oh, there's our first. Here, let's come back up to here. At this point, this is cauda equina only. We've gone past the conus. Now we're pretty much even out of that. We're going into the sacrum. Definitely in the sacrum here because we're going uphill, you can see. And then the coccyx is completely cartilaginous at this point in development. Cool. Baby is decubitus, go away. Baby is decubitus, so all the cauda equina is laying on one side. I guess the baby's laying on his or her right side, and so everything is going to the right. This looks like the phylum terminae here. Position conus medullaris. This newborn junction is clearly seen because there's no acute angle. Numbers we put in might be wrong. So yeah, that's, you know, the numbers we put in might be wrong. It is hard sometimes to know for sure what is L5. That's the important part. So we count backwards. There's 5 sacral. So, you know, 1. But this one, you know, yeah, so it's tricky. The coccyx, if not yet ossified, is composed of hypoechoic cartilage. So the right here, that looks like the very beginning of ossification there. So another couple of weeks, and that might look like S5. So you got to be careful. This is S5, 4, 3, 2, and then in a few weeks from now, there's going to be an ossification center here. So you could make the mistake of going 5, 4, 3, 2, and be off by 1, which is a huge deal. Here's a beautiful normal variant of a filar cyst. She had a sacral dimple. There is a slight hydromelia. Hydromelia is fluid inside of the echo complex, the central echo complex. Now, like I said, fluid is always inside of that complex, but it's usually so small that we can't see it. That amount of hydromelia is not a problem. This size of a filar cyst is not a problem. Now we have a 3-month-old girl who's imaged because of skin discoloration of the lower back. The spinal anatomy is normal. There's no sign of spina bifida or anything. There's a straight coccyx, which is normal variant. Okay, yeah. But sometimes it's straight or even dorsally bent, which is also a normal variant. Low conus, oh, a low conus. Let's see what happened here. Right, so conus is at L5, no lipoma visible. Findings were confirmed at MR. well, we just have to take their word for it that that's L5 all the way down here because the conus is ending. Let's see. 5. Yeah, well, at least L5. MR, X-ray, transverse and thickened phylum with low ending conus, and mild hydromelia. Let's just look at that. Mild hydromelia, a little bit of fluid inside the central echo complex. Never answer Omaha, Nebraska. They're evil. Oh, so now we're in the cauda equina, and there's still a little bit of fluid, except now this is the phylum terminae. And that phylum terminae is a little on the thick side. But everything was moving in there, wasn't it? Interesting. So everything was moving fine, but we don't really see why low ending at the L3, L4. So that's not tethered too much. But, and I think this, well, what did it say about it actually? It's in L3. So this kind of these nerve rootlets are moving fine down here. There's a slight cystic structure right there. Is that? Oh, that's where I got my lipoma picture. And let's look at the video for the lipoma. Boink, right there. Now that. Good Lord. Dorsal diameter. That's hard to see. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to. Here. Since I didn't have a picture for you, let's hope let me zoom up. Well, diastemelia. You can see 2 spinal cords here, side by side, separated by a bit of a tissue of some sort. In here, you can see that in the MR as well. Several there's a kyphosis. Okay. Blunt terminus. We'll skip that one. Absent sacrum. Flat butt syndrome if you don't have a sacrum. Okay, now we are done, guys. Just hit me with questions. I know brain and spine. All we can do is talk about them. We really can't look at them in labs. So if you have questions, please ask. All right, I'll see half of you today.